Welcome, everybody, to What is Fabrizio Inking? And I am inking. No, I'm Fabrizio. And today I'm going to be inking this drawing. On blue line, we have Horace H. Hoover, and we have some shrunken heads, we have a swamp, and we have a damsel in distress. This character is a comic book character that is the main protagonist of a comic book series I have currently called Horace H. Hoover from Alterna Comics, if you are interested. So we made a fair amount of progress last time. Just kind of getting a few shapes in, some outlines, a little bit of detail. There's a lot going on. All these tree branches and moss and things like that. Good evening, Yang Yan Zhao. Thanks for joining. This drawing will definitely take several more hours, but I just want to make sure that I hit most areas of the drawing first, just to make sure I don't need to fix anything. So any problem areas I try to get to a little early. The first two issues of H. Hoover just arrived for me today. Oh, that's awesome. Thanks for buying that. I really appreciate that. Let me know what you think. If you're on Twitter or Instagram, just shoot me a message. I'd love to hear what you think about them. Hey, Captain Goodnight, how's it going? Your King Cryptid cards came out great, especially Victor Lugo. If you're still looking for drawing suggestions, I'd suggest more like him, larger-than-life action villains, Bond, MSN, Impossible. Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, I'm definitely looking for suggestions. Just like I said, just breaking things up a little bit. You want different genres, different styles, backgrounds, things like that, to make sure you don't get in a rut. You have to make sure that you're doing different things. If not, you'll wake up one day and you'll realize that you haven't really progressed at all. And worse than being bad at something, well, not worse, but once you get over the fear of being bad at something, the next biggest fear is not progressing. I remember when I first read Contract with God, Will Eisner's graphic novel, and I didn't realize how old he was when he did that. And I'm just marveling over the line work and the story. It's really a brilliant piece of comic book. And then I wait a minute, this was published on X date, and Will Eisner was how old? So he never, Will Eisner's one of those guys that never he never stopped progressing. He didn't he didn't, I don't know, settle for a particular style, a particular story, and then never do anything else. So up until he was pretty old, he was still doing really incredible work. So I kind of use that as my guidepost. I know it's hard to find time to learn in addition to producing, but I think you can do both. To be completely honest, doing this like swamp scene makes me want to draw Swamp Thing, which I've never drawn. I've never actually read the Alan Moore run. I know that's blasphemy, but I was never a big DC guy, so it just never was on my radar. I know people always refer to it, but I just never got around to reading it. I've probably read everything else that Alan Moore's done. I don't, maybe not, but close, including the Liefeld stuff. I could spend a lot of time doing this bottom part, but like I said, I want to make sure I jump around a little bit and not focus too much on one area. Hey John, how's it going? Before I commit to watching this, Fabrizio, what color socks you wear? I believe I'm wearing Christmas socks. You heard it, Christmas socks. So I don't know which personality that is. I haven't given them all names quite yet, but hey Blake, how's it going? Thanks for tuning in. I feel like finally, since I named this podcast YouTube channel, what is Fabrizio inking, that initial anxiety, that first 5 minutes of not knowing what to say whenever I start is over. So I feel like I made a lot of progress. And any way I can put my name in the title, I mean, that's a win. forcing people to say Fabrizio. Kringle Ayala. Cringle Ayala. It's a good name. Thank you. Thank you. Again, it is based off of the sequel to the very early What is Fabrizio Drinking podcast from 10, 15 years ago. I believe I had 6 subscribers. I don't even know if we had subscribers back then, just listeners, which were all my friends, basically. Hey Buddha Bear, how's it going? I tried to zoom in more for this, because after looking at the videos afterwards, it seemed like you couldn't quite see what I was doing all the time. So hopefully this looks a little better. So tomorrow at 8 o'clock, I'll be on John's Long Box, and we'll be talking comics, monsters, Halloween, spooky time stuff. That should be fun. So, inking on blue line, it's, again, I've been over this, but I just like this paper better. The paper that I like to pencil on is bad for inking, and paper that I like inking on is bad for pencils. There's a lot of benefits. One is you don't have to worry about messing up the inking, or I'm sorry, the pencils, if you mess up the inking. But there is, no matter how dark you essentially print the blue line, it can be a little confusing. At least for my pencils, which are, they're not super tight, but they're not super loose. Somewhere in between, I would say. Cool. Awesome, Blake. If Tonic Mole doesn't smoke too much pot, he might show up tomorrow. Excellent. Red Centric the Boiled Frog. Hello, everyone. Hand pinky waving. How's it going? Thanks for joining. We have a pretty crazy swamp scene with a lot of vegetation that I have to draw. So hopefully there's some fans of botanical art in the chat, which, to be completely honest, I do really like looking at. I don't really do much of it, though. My senior year in college for drawing 4, which is the sort of the highest level you could go for drawing, I spent all semester doing trees. So pen and ink trees, I did pastels with ink. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time doing trees. I love how normal sounding all the Alterna guys sound while drawing Monsters and Insanity. You know, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but David Lynch has this clip where he talks about how he eats the same thing every day. I don't know if he wears the same thing every day either. But his theory is that in repetition and sort of, not causing too much chaos in your life and everything else, you can you can expend more energy in creating these really crazy worlds and these different scenes. So I've actually found that to be pretty accurate for me, at least. You know, I have a job that's as stressful as anybody else's, but it's not too crazy. So that kind of lets me put the crazy into the stories. I actually had this, I was working on a video game for myself, and I wrote this story. I might pick it up one of these days again, I don't know. But in this particular story, it was really dark. It's about a husband and his wife dies, or she gets sick and dies, and it was so depressing that I had to stop it. I had to stop working on it for a while, because it was too much. If it becomes even remotely a reality of something that can happen, then it doesn't really, I don't know. There's no enjoyment at that point. It's just pure torture. All of those sort of abandoned games and ideas, I minimum will turn those into fake ads in one of the issues of Horace H. Hoover. Very much how I did Monster Beach Vacation, because that was another video game I had worked on, and it got abandoned. It was abandoned, but I always loved the idea. So I'm like, you know what? I can at least bring it to some sort of completion. It's not really completion, but just to have it out there. And I know, like most artists, we have a lot of abandoned projects out there, that's for sure. Captain Goodnight, not abandoned, just dormant. Yeah, I mean, I definitely would go through stacks of old drawings, see a character, sketch, or a concept, and then find a place for it. Kind of like I do with this stuff here, but even older, like much, much older stuff. So I'm not saying you should hang on to everything you've ever touched, but sometimes it's a good idea to take a look at it, and maybe you can't see a use for it right now, but you know, there's something about it, whether it's something in the character design or a plot idea or something like that. You just never know. It is funny about, speaking of the games, this one particular game that I was working on, I was probably working on it for 6 months, full time. It was my game, art, etc. And I remember coming to a realization that, all right, well, I have to spend another 6 months on it to really finish it. Am I going to do that? Well, at the end, at least I'll have a finished game. And then I realized, I'm like, well, I don't really play games. I have to know how to do them for work, but like in my free time, it's not something I really do. So that's when I really shifted gears. I'm like, you know what? I would rather spend that 6 months or whatever it is to do a comic book. I love comic books. Having a comic book in a short box of my own would be incredible. And that was really when everything kind of shifted. And then I did the not so brilliant thing of doing the entire comic book by myself, every last piece of it. So it would take quite a bit of time. How cool is it to see your own comic next to the other comics you love? It's crazy. Like I still can't believe it whenever I pull one out. I even bought these. They're like brown newspaper bags that fit a comic book perfectly. And I don't know if anybody else knows what I'm talking about, but those were the bags that my local newsstand would sell comic books in. So I really made a point to buy those bags so I could see my comic book in that brown paper bag. Do you get fan art of HHH? I've gotten a few, yeah. Revan Saber, him and his son have posted some pieces, which are really fun. Yeah, not a lot, but some, which is really, again, it's crazy to think about that. I mean, you love the character, and you hope other people like it, and that they like the same things about the character that you like, but sometimes they'll latch onto something else completely, and it's even more fun. Like Slurp seems to be a fan favorite, which is a lot of fun. I might actually go through all of my old artwork, maybe some of my game artwork, just other illustration stuff. I've posted a few things on Instagram, but I never really went through the stacks and stacks of artwork that I have. It might be interesting. There's a lot of watercolor in there, and you can kind of see my art style progress from pretty traditional illustration style to more comic book stuff. Captain Goodnight. It's impressive that Alterna has several one skill titles. Writing, pencils, inks, colors, lettering come out of a single skull. One skull titles. Yeah, that's awesome. It is pretty rare. I knew it would be rare, but even in the indie scene, it's a little more rare than I had thought. So that's pretty fun to see other people at Alterna doing the same thing. John, Max is my favorite. Yeah, I'm really excited for like later issues whenever we can really get into Max's backstory and that kind of stuff. But hopefully, you hint at a few things and enough things come through in the dialogue where you really get a feel for the character, even though you don't know everything. And I guess that's the trick of writing, really. Like subtext and just archetype sort of features and to say a lot more than what's actually on the page. I can't help but think, whenever I see a swamp, I always think of The Fugitive, or not The Fugitive, U.S. Marshals. I don't know if there's any like really famous swamp scenes that I'm blanking on, but I always think of that. Speaking of Swamp Thing, I haven't watched the original Swamp Thing movie probably in 20 or 30 years. I really should go rewatch that. I remember loving it as a kid. I don't know if that would hold up now, but I should definitely give it a whirl. My sister and I got free passes to that movie, and we were the only two in the theater. Wow. I definitely didn't see it in the theater. I think it was on HBO when I saw it. And I don't know if anybody remembers, but back in the day, HBO would just play the same, 4 movies over and over and over and over again. So I must have seen that thing a million times. Yeah, I do feel guilty about never reading The Swamp Thing. It's always something I had planned, but ever since I started doing Horace H. Hoover, all of my reading has been educational or, referencing things, so I don't really read a lot for enjoyment that much anymore. Yeah, I've always heard that. And again, I have probably read every other thing that Alan Moore has written. Probably. I mean, I've read from Tom Strong to Top 10 to the new Providence stuff. I mean, obviously the big stuff like Watchmen and V for Vendetta. And yeah, so I don't know if there's much that I haven't read of his. Besides that. I have Providence, but I didn't read it. I don't want to color your opinion of it. It's not my favorite Alan Moore. I'll just leave it at that. I really did love Top 10. I mean, it's been a long time since I read that, but that was the last couple of volumes of some of his work that I really loved it. I can't even remember how it ended, but it was such a great setting and lots of great characterization. ABC comics were so good. Trying to think. Actually, I just watched From Hell again, which I know people hate the movie. Yeah, and here's my thing, and I've probably said this before, but yeah, the movie's nothing like the comic book, but the movie's still fun. I mean, the comic book is so crazy and huge that you know, like everything else, you can't really make a movie of it, so. But the movie is still pretty fun. Admittedly, I'm probably biased because I love Jack the Ripper. If I would watch a Jack the Ripper movie every year if they made one. Yeah, Tom Strong. I love Tom Strong. Oh my god, I'm blanking on the artist. I love his work. I used to pore over Tom Strong. Darn it. I'm not going to look it up now. I'm blanking on his name. But I love the artist for Tom Strong. Like it's just like the most classic superhero versions. Scariest comic I've ever read. Tom Strong? Oh, From Hell. For a second there, I got really confused that I missed something in Tom Strong. Yeah, the From Hell book is just, that's on a completely different level. It really is a piece of literature that I try to get people to read. It was funny. I bought my copy a long time ago, and it's in pristine shape. And I used to talk about it a lot, and then I realized people were like, oh, can I borrow it? And I'm thinking, no, you can't borrow it. Oh, have a good night, John. Thanks for stopping in. We're getting pretty far here. A lot of the trees are done. Not done, but they're the basic shapes of the trees are there, which is really it's a good place to have. That way you're not searching for the edges of trees or anything. Oh, hey Justin, how's it going? I haven't read Tom Strong, but I've seen some reviews and it looks like classic daily comic strip. It seems like insightful fun. Yeah, it really is. It's like a classic superhero. It's very not Alan Moore. There's no deconstruction. There's no like nihilistic kind of views on anything. It's really, really fun stuff. All right, so this definitely needs some work. If not, I'm going to get too far with the other pieces of the drawing, so I gotta do something over here. My brush is actually starting to dry a little bit. I'll go a little further though. It's almost a certainty that one of these days I'm going to spill my ink all over my table, and you will just hear a loud exclamation and me running away. This is looking really nice. Is this a page or a cover? Thanks. I appreciate that. It's actually neither right now. It's just some concept art that I did. I'll just do some scenes with some characters, and then kind of decide if it becomes something. So this turned out pretty nice. I really like sort of the atmosphere, the setting. It's the whole kit and caboodle. So I'm definitely going to make this into a story. I don't know if I'll use this exact image, though. We'll see. It's really freeing just working on concept art like this. Kind of let my mind wander and kind of answer questions like what the heck is going on in this scene, and then kind of write a story around that. And if I can't think of anything, then probably goes on a pile for a while, and then I can reference it later on, but there's really no pressure. I mean, granted, it's a chunk of time to finish these, but at minimum I have a finished drawing. But this is turning out pretty nice, thanks. Captain Goodnight. Is that Mrs. Hoover or a different character? This is a different character. I have an idea. I mean, to be completely honest, this could be Mrs. Hoover. She looks similar enough where I could sort of pull it off. So don't quote me on that. I just wanted sort of a cute girl to put in here. And this is, I don't want to say this is how I draw women, but you kind of get you have a way of drawing characters, whether they're male or female. So sometimes they look similar unless you really try to make sure they don't. For her in particular, I could have said, okay, I'm going to make this girl very different, so I'll give her a very angular face, and I'll give her a really square jaw or something like that. I didn't do it in the scenario, so that's why I'm like, well, I could definitely turn it into Mrs. Hoover if I needed to. Yeah, this will definitely take a few more sessions. I like to keep it at about an hour. That's a good time for getting a decent amount of progress, but also not overworking it. Even when I'm doing Horace H. Hoover, the comic book, I like to have multiple pages so I can jump from page to page. That way, whenever I come back to it, it's with fresh eyes, as opposed to just grinding through a page or two. I have multiples that I can pull in and out. That's a good idea. I'm definitely a grinder, man. Yeah, it just helps me because I need that time in between, even if it's like 10 or 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be a ton of time, but then you bring it back and you're like, oh, geez, I really messed up his arm or his leg or something like that. For me, it helps a lot. I used to watch Jim Lee's streams. He still does them, but he does, I think, just more illustration. But whenever he would do his pages, man, watching him do pages was really fascinating. I learned more from that than I think anything. And you would see him, he would work a little bit on the page, then he would turn to chat and talk for a while, and I realized that's really what he was doing. I think he might have even said that's what he was doing. But you could see he would do a chunk of the drawing, he would turn to the chat, talk a little bit, and then by the time he was done, he had kind of fresher eyes to work or fix what he had done before. And I'm like, well, if Jim Lee needs that time, who the heck am I? There's a certain point in the drawing or inking where, you know, what you've already done as opposed to what you have left to do. So, if I look at this and I'll say, well, I have more than half of it done. So I have like 65% of it done. And that 65% of it is actually pretty solid. Then I know that it's not that I can't mess up from here, because you can always mess things up, but it's probably not irreparable. So even if you mess up a branch or this or that, just because so much of the drawing is done and done properly, that your mistakes aren't really going to show up nearly as much. It's just a numbers game. At least that's how I've always thought of it. It's definitely fun drawing all these crazy branches with moss or whatever hanging from them. It's a lot of fun. I can definitely see drawing Swamp Thing being a lot of fun. Tedious, maybe, but at least in the beginning, quite really fun because it's just so organic. And you are sticking to anatomy-ish, I guess, with Swamp Thing, but not really. I mean, you can really play around with all that kind of stuff. And then now, if I'm gonna have a setting with Horace in a swamp, I'm gonna have to really think about some new creatures that I can design for it that we haven't seen a million times before. That's the kicker, right? Like, you can sit and you can do slight variations of classic monsters, and sometimes that works, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it's nice to be able to pull something out of the hat that is very different than what people have seen. I think it's nice to have a good mix of archetypes and sort of classic. Archetypes being classic things, and then just whole cloth new monsters. That mix is really nice. This is one of those scenarios where this would have been really difficult to do with a pen. You know, this sort of organic, these trees. I mean, you can do them. It takes a lot longer with a pen. This is where a brush really excels. And vice versa, pens are really good with architecture, and brushes are not. So, depending on the scenario, really depends on the tool, which is better. But then you get used to using the tool, and you're sort of loath to switch tools, which I get. I use a brush 90% of the time for the comic book, but you really gotta do what makes the most sense. Hey Blue Teddy, how's it going? Thanks for joining. What is Fabrizio inking? Oh, thanks. I'm really digging the head in the top left. Yeah, thank you. I knew that was going to be a big focal point for the drawing, so I really wanted to make that pop. The other thing too is I made this really big, and then I made small heads in the back, just so you really got the scale, and then there's depth to show that these are quite a bit closer. That's looking great. Thanks, Blue Teddy. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it so far. Made decent amount of progress, kind of popping around. Things are kind of coming to life a bit. Still a fair amount of detail to do, but I'm getting there. I've been considering coloring it using watercolor or something like that, but I have to do a test first for that. I haven't tried to do any other kind of media on these Eon boards, but that would be nice. What I would probably do is I would scan in the inks, pull out the blue line, and then print the inks in blue line, either on this board if it works out, or watercolor paper, and then I would layer it. I'd do the watercolor, and then I would go into Photoshop and layer it. We'll see though. It'll be fun just to experiment with that. Usually my watercolors are pretty loose, so if it fits, great, but I highly doubt on this Bristol board that I can do more than like 2 layers of some watercolor, and even then I don't think I can saturate it too much. never actually been in a legit swamp, I don't think. We had a place near the town I grew up. We used to call it the Black Swamps, but I don't think it was a real swamp. I don't know why it was called that. You never know. Yeah, I'll finish up here in a few minutes. Today is Thursday. Yeah, so I won't be streaming tomorrow, but I'll be on John's Longbox, just chatting Halloween and fall type stuff. And I'll probably stream Sunday, definitely, maybe Saturday. I do have to jump back on that Shadow over Innsmouth ink and a few other things. But again, it's nice just to jump around a bit. Just let something sit, come back to it, and then kind of knock it out. The one thing that you may run into doing blue line inks like this, though, sometimes, is that it'll actually repel the ink sometimes, depending on the amount of ink on the page. I've run across that sometimes. It's really rare that'll happen, but when it happens, it's not great. Because it almost beads up a little bit. All right, we're at an hour, so I think that's pretty good. Let's kind of go from the top down here. So we have this swamp scene, made quite a bit of progress, kind of roughing things out, getting a lot of those branches in there. Got quite a bit more of Horace H. Hoover. Started inking our damsel a little more, and just working on some of the water reflections. So, yeah, looking good, and I will continue this as the week goes on, maybe into next week too. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody in chat. I appreciate it, and hope everybody has a good night. Thanks a lot. Bye.